the Niners technically have the second oldest 90-man roster in the league right now. Now, some of these guys will get cut. We'll have to recalibrate when it's down to 53. But right now, the Niners have the second oldest roster in the league after Houston, which is hilarious. I mean, the worst and oldest roster in the league. Good going, Houston. But the Niners are in an interesting position. They chose this. They brought back a lot of guys in their 30s. You saw this is what they wanted to do. Should the fans, should the team be concerned about this particular roster construction? Jack.
I don't think there should necessarily be a concern about the construction. I think the bigger concern really has to do with some of the guys that they brought back that have a history of injury. But when you look at it, the main reason that's kind of pushed them there is that they went out and they got a center that's 35 years old. They just, they went out and they re-signed a left tackle that's 33. They brought a bunch of their own veterans back who are aging. If you look at their starting secondary, the starting 5 guys that should be in their secondary, they're average 29 years old in the secondary as well. And Verrett's a guy who's almost never stayed healthy. So
I mean, that's one of the spots you want to be young at, right?
You would think so, yeah. For sure. I mean, even 29, I guess, it's not old in our terms, right? But in football terms, it's getting up there.
Well, real quick, the average age of the Niners roster is like 26 plus, and the average age of the youngest roster is like 24. So we're talking, it's all very close, but 29 is technically kind of old in football years. Sorry to keep
it is. No, it's okay. And it is. That's something that we talked about during free agency. If you remember, briefly, when they started signing, we mentioned how they got old really fast. And this chart came out and it kind of proved what we had been talking about.
One of the reasons I was kind of against the Trent Williams re-signing, even though he's fabulous, it's like he's 33, man. It's another one of these guys. Okay, what do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually in general, I would view this as a plus this year. I think that normally a team can't afford to keep so many veterans in a standard off season. I think that because of the COVID situation, we were able to bring a lot of guys back on 1-year deals that should have been paid higher market rates. I think in a normal offseason, many of those guys would have gotten multiple year deals and they probably would have left in free agency. I think that they tended to come back to the team they were familiar with that gave them the best shot at a 1-year successful season, setting themselves up for free agency yet again in 2022. And so I think that normally we wouldn't have been able to keep this all together. And I do think that it's skewed by several significantly older players. I am concerned on a couple of the long-term deals, because if you start to see regression towards the age at some point, now you're stuck with a ton of dead money. And the 49ers organization is just not one that really seems set up to handle that dead money, because we're up against the cap year in and year out trying to compete. And then, lastly, the point with Jack is a great one. The injury prone is a huge concern. I think that the term injury prone gets thrown around pretty loosely, and it's generally used to describe a myriad of reasons. And I think that in general, it is not applicable to all players. It's applicable to a smaller percentage. So there's only a couple of players that I'm concerned about, but there are several players within the same position groups that you would worry about. And now you're talking about depth and potentially rookies coming in and having to fill significant roles. So the age that Jack brings up, I think is the biggest question there. Sorry, not the age, the injury prone older players.
I mean, other teams have older rosters, like Baltimore has a pretty old roster, Buffalo, New England, Arizona. But I think the reason we're talking about it is because the Niners have, I'm not saying they have an injury-prone roster. They just have a lot of injuries the last 8 years. It's just a pattern. And you factor in that and the fact that the Niners are now old, it's like, well, what could go wrong? Not to say that it will, but it seems like what they're doing is giving it one more shot. They don't want to be old, but it's a bunch of guys who've been with them. And they're giving it one more go. One way or another, I think this team's going to look a lot different in 2022. I mean, Trent Williams will still be here and some of these older guys, but I think a lot of them, who knows if Jason Verrett, Jimmy Ward, Jaquiski Tartt, a lot of these guys could be gone, and the Niners, they're going to have to reload eventually. Their starting quarterback's going to be 22 next year. They might be a lot younger in 20. This could be like the last hurrah for this particular iteration of the 49ers. What do you think?
I think that's spot on. I think that next year, absolutely, we will see some multi-year deals that we'll see our players moving on for multi-year deals and new players coming in trying to fill all those holes that we filled with one-year deals this year.
Yeah, I think Rob hit on some really good points. I think you've got that older roster which is going to help you out in 2021. Mm-hmm. And the 49ers have also done a pretty good job, though, I think, of stacking up some pieces behind them, so to give them some good depth moving forward. And I agree also with Rob. There's definitely some concern when you look at the Trent Williams deal and the Kyle Juszczyk deal. Those are tough deals for down the road. Eric Armstead's going to be the second highest paid 49er, or he might even be the highest paid 49er based on the salary cap hit in 2022. He's already the second highest cap hit this year. So it's going to only get tougher as the Kittle deal starts to hit. Next year, Jimmy Ward in 2022, Jimmy Ward's deal is going to max out, that contract that he re-signed. So there's going to be, right now, they don't have a whole lot of cap space for next season until they get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo.
Maybe that's another reason why contract negotiations haven't begun between Fred Warner and 49ers. Yeah. All right, we'll move on. Real quick, I want to shout out all the people watching on YouTube, on Twitch. All of a sudden, there's a hearty community watching on Twitch and commenting. People probably watching on Twitter and Facebook, and millions watching across the world. Thank you very much. Really means a lot.